Niall Stange, White House columnist for The Hill, joining me right now. Good to see you. Good to see you on Wednesday.
Good to see you. Good to see you too. Welcome back.
Thank you. Got to start with Congresswoman Cheney, backed by former President George W. Bush and Senator Mitt Romney, famously critiquing former President Trump. We could go on and on. January 6th committee, yada, yada. But she had record funding in the primary. Has Liz Cheney become the villain in the Republican Party?
She has, yes. I mean, clearly within the Republican Party, her position is very, very unpopular. That position characterized by vehement opposition to former President Trump and by the belief that he poses an existential threat to American democracy. Liz Cheney, as you say, raised $12 million or thereabouts, Adrienne, an enormous amount of money for a Wyoming Republican primary. But that wasn't enough to save her because Republican voters in her state were so adamantly against the position she adopted.
Well, let's talk a little bit about who she was defeated by. Harriet Hageman, a conservative lawyer backed by former President Trump. She did not have to fundraise at anywhere near what Liz Cheney had to do. But this is another win for one of his endorsements. What does this mean for what the majority of the Republican Party wants right now?
It's interesting, you know, the majority of the Republican Party, we have become accustomed, I think, to talking about the mainstream of the Republican Party as if that isn't the Trump stream. And I think we kind of need to all adjust our mindsets about that a little bit. The mainstream of the Republican Party now is the Trump faction, the Trump wing. Those people, the Trump people, were considered sort of insurgents when he was first running for president. But the insurgents have taken over the fort now in terms of the Republican Party and have done for some time. They really are the mainstream, and the Mitt Romneys of the world and the Liz Cheneys of the world are increasingly marginalized within their own party.
But it's interesting because if you speak to anyone, whether they are Republican or Democrat, it seems as though, you know, former President Trump is this pariah to a lot of people. And then at the same time, there are a lot of people who seem to be convinced that Republicans are going to vote for issues, platform, over personality. And that's going to win the day.
That's true. And I think that the question there is whether there is a platform that was sort of pioneered by the former president, that is populist, that is more protectionist on economic issues, that has less of that whiff of country club republicanism around it. Is that the winning platform for Republicans? A platform that seems to be, for example, more able to draw the support of working class Latino voters, for instance, a bloc that the party had previously enormous difficulties with. The reason I was hesitant at the start of my response is that in addition to that platform, there isn't really a question that former President Trump does exert a massive personal pull over the GOP. That's why Harriet Hageman is now the victor and the presumptive victor in November, rather than any of the other anti-Cheney candidates who first got into this race.
But I feel like nobody's really explaining why. They're not saying, you know, well, you know, there's a lot of critique of the former president, but nobody's really addressing why there are so many Republicans who still back him as a leader within the party, whether or not he runs in 2024 or not. The influence that he has, and just, you know, let's make it plain. Is it because they think the government is far too overreaching? Is it because they think that there is some type of truth to the witch hunt? Is it because he is so solidly for the traditions and the values of the Republican Party that have been held, even though he said some things and done some things that most people disagree with?
Not for the first time. I wish we had more time to answer that, but I'll give it a go anyway. I think that part of it is anti-elitism and a distrust of elite institutions. He clearly stands against that. There's a large number of not only conservatives, but voters in this country who think that the media's distrust of him actually commends him to them. I think part of it is that economic protectionism. Part of it is the idea that he says things that conservative people in particular want said and feel hasn't been said. And another part of it is, frankly, just a long-held distrust of the Washington Republican establishment that many conservative voters felt used them as cannon fodder without ever really delivering on their priorities.
Niall Stange, I know we didn't get to Sarah Palin, projected to advance to the November general election, or Murkowski, but we can talk about it on Friday. Or maybe not. Anyways.
Always more time.
Thank you, Niall. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.